I would imagine that there were ideas or story elements or even moment-by-moment decisions that caused a lot of debate amongst you. Like, what were some of the things that you would look back and you're like, man, we couldn't decide on this, or we really had a lot of creative arguments, let's put it that way, about...
I remember one time when they were all against me, Mo.
Was that for five seasons?
So many times.
No, I mean, the one time, I mean, it was the one time I was about to say is that Jane.
Jane.
Yeah, that was a big one. Jane
Hotly
choking.
debated. Yeah.
Because I don't, again, like I said, I don't remember who said what 90% of the time, but I do remember I kind of bungled into the whole Jane choking to death on her own vomit and Walt not stopping it from happening from the angle of, I think my first thought was, let's just have Walt give her a hot dose of heroin and actively murder her. And everyone, I remember, it's one of those things you're like pitching to the window, and you turn around and everybody's looking at you with this abject horror, you know, and that was a big one.
Put it on the board.
It moved to, you know, not complete omission and just watching, like, is where it ended up, but it moved to him seeing her choke and actually, like, turning her cheeks so that she would actually aspirate, so that she was on her back, as opposed to, and then ultimately we landed at just complete, he just watches it and doesn't actually do an active...
No intervention.
And these guys were right, by the way, because my first instinct would have been, and truth be told, as any viewer of the show knows, he did get just that bad, but he got that bad later. That was only...
It was too soon.
It would have been too soon, and these guys were right, and that's why you pack really smart people around you, and then you know enough to, if enough people tell you you're drunk, you need to sit down. That's the whole trick to this job.
I was so mad when he did that. I was mad.
When he
I was like,
neglected
wow.
to save her? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, you can say, oh, well, then he later, you know, turned a machine gun on a bunch of people. But I mean, to me, it's that Jane moment was really hard for me as a viewer of the show. It was really like, do I want to keep following this guy? Because he's clearly willing to put his own needs before those of just innocent people. I mean, obviously Jane had her issues, but that to me, the passivity of it doesn't like it's still not okay, you know? Like him just standing there.
He's not less of a murderer.
No, you're right. He's not any less of a murderer. But you know, I people I love who are close to me. I was actually, again, I was watching this marathon recently over the holidays, and my girlfriend Holly said, I think we were watching that very one, and she said we had to do it because
Holly.
Because, well, her point was, I mean, she was horrified by it too, as were you, but her take on it was, he loves Jesse, he doesn't love Jane. Jesse's important to him. Jesse is going to die from heroin sooner or later if something big doesn't change here. The way she read it, watching it again, and again, is what you said a little while ago. You watch it with fresh eyes every time you see anything, not just this show, but because you're a different person. But, you know, her take on it was, Jesse's more important to me than Jane is, and Jane is going to get, and by the way, you know, there's all the nuances of Jesse kind of got Jane back on drugs, right. But nonetheless, here's where they are. Jane is the person who introduces them to heroin, and this is going to end badly. So maybe God or fate or the universe is taking a hand here where they're starting to choke. Although if you watch the scene real closely, he doesn't do it on purpose, but he's shaking Jesse, trying to wake him up, and that action inadvertently is what flops her over onto her back.
Oh,
so
right.
You got to watch it real close to see.
He also, I mean, it doesn't excuse it, but it's also, it's another case where Cranston bails you out in the sense that, like, if he didn't have cancer before, on his face as he's doing this, it's giving him, I mean, it's taking such, I mean, it's the toll, the moral acknowledgement of what he's doing, as opposed to there's, in another performance, it's sort of like, oh, well, it's not a pretty thing, but I had to do, but it's just like, you can see that a part of Walt is dying in that moment as well, and, but yeah, Probably shouldn't have.
Yeah.
Even his
Probably
most
should
It
have.
was a
Not let her die.
beautifully acted moment.
Oh my gosh.
even in his most evil, he was never mustache twirling. You know,
No.
Oh,
he
yeah.
would, and you know, with a weird, there's just a seduction of the audience constantly.
Yeah.
That I always felt that I still find this is that the scenes have so much more emotional impact than I'm expecting. You know, that scene's one of them. Another one was when Jesse sees Andrea getting shot, and
Oh,
I
God.
remember when
Yeah.
I really had no
You wrote
idea.
that one.
I wrote
Yeah.
that one. I had no idea what Aaron was going to do exactly, and then what he did was so shocking and so raw. It went way beyond anything I would have
Feral.
pictured.
Yeah.
Feral,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so it's one of the wonderful things about. You know, because we spend so much time talking about these things, we try never to be cold about them, but it has a different impact once the cast gets a hold of it.
I was angry when I watched that episode because I was on my honeymoon, and so I was like watching it on my little laptop, and I got really mad at us when Andrea died. Yeah, I did, because I guess, you know, when you're in it and you're doing it, you always have a little bit of that distance from the story because you know every possibility that you discussed, you know what we chose, and you kind of have to separate yourself in a way because otherwise you'll get like emotionally overwhelmed. But watching it as a viewer, I was like devastated. I'm sitting on this bed at my honeymoon and I'm like crying and mad at us at the same time.
I didn't
So
know this.
yeah, just the way it played, and yeah, it was really
Sorry.
yeah.
And now,
Peter.
wow, what a story! And now is as good a time as any to say, and it's been hinted at already. But you know, again, it's to riff on what Peter was saying. I couldn't be more proud of the writing of the work all of us did. But that only gets you so far. If it hadn't been for Bryan Cranston, if it hadn't been for Aaron Paul, and Anna Gunn, and Dean Norris, and Betsy Brand, R.J. Mitty, Giancarlo Esposito, Jonathan Banks, this whole crew, Bob Odenkirk. Now, once you get started, you can't leave anybody out. I mean, you know, I don't think we'd have been invited here to do this today. I mean, it's just, you know, lesser actors. And again, it all starts, in this case, really with that number one on the call sheet. Bryan, there were so many, it was such a minefield to play this character, so many potential pitfalls and traps. And if he had mustache twirled, or if he had, you know, the big thing I was worried about from the get-go is that actors, as we all, and because actors are only human beings, you know, like the rest of us, you don't really want to be disliked. You don't really want to be, actors sometimes, historically, tend to, whether they realize it or not, soften their character, their approach to their character, if they're playing it for years on end, because they don't want to be disliked. They don't want to be unlikable. And I sort of feared, because I said to Bryan early on, this guy's really going to get dark.
Yeah.
And he was like, bring it on, man. He was never blinked. He never faltered. He was fearless. Not just being physically naked or physically unattractive or wearing his tighty whitey. None of that stuff fazed him. But he didn't care if the whole world hated him. And weirdly enough, because of that, I think the world embraced him even when his character did the worst conceivable things.